bowling ball going back and forth in a line from you to me.
For the viewers out there, I just want to, I don't want to get into this subject right now, but Marcus mentioned Henry Luce from Life magazine. Yes, I am writing a book. It's half done on the JFK assassination. I will talk about that in a later video. I don't want to get into that right here, but I did want to add one point before we move on, and it was a very good point. Henry Luce, I don't know if Henry Luce was the owner of Life magazine at the time Kennedy was assassinated, but it's interesting to note that Life magazine has always been a corrupt magazine. They've been owned by the deep state, and they got their hands on the Zapruder film, and then they kept that hidden for almost 15 years.
Yeah.
It wasn't until that came out and that a lot of people really had a lot of questions about what really happened that day. So I just thought I'd add that little point. It was a nice little sideline that you brought up. So I just wanted to make that a point. Shall I read on, Marcus?
Yeah, read on, because it's good stuff.
Yes. Okay, so we're going to talk about the
It's breaking up a bit.
next quoting blueprints. Another item that is trotted out as alleged proof that the fake moon missions actually happened is the existence of all those lunar rocks that they supposedly brought back from their travels. In August of 2009, it was reported, albeit as a news oddity, and it certainly was, that an alleged moon rock personally given to the Prime Minister of the Netherlands by Neil Armstrong in 1969, who supposedly handpicked it off of the lunar surface himself for this purpose, was opened 40 years later from its presumed permanently, hermetically sealed container by a curious museum curator after he had watched A Funny Thing Happened to the Moon, which is Bart Sibrel's documentary, with great interest. Following his microscopic examination, the rock was verified to actually be a forgery. It turned out to be a deceptive, out-of-this-world looking piece of petrified wood. Yet again, not a single journalist except for myself asked the question, quote, if the moon rocks are fake, what does this say about the moon missions, unquote.
Yeah, exactly. That Rijksmuseum moon rock was quite big news at the time, because it was considered to be a curiosity. It was following the renovations in the Rijksmuseum, where they had to they were changing some of the exhibits, changing some of the rooms. The Rijksmuseum, by the way, is where the magnificent Rembrandt painting Night Watch is permanently displayed. It's a national treasure of the Netherlands. It will never leave the country. Anyway, 2009, they were renovating part of the Rijksmuseum, and they dismantled the space exhibits. And amongst the exhibits was this piece of moon rock. I mean, we knew it was moon rock, didn't we? Because it said on it, moon rock. Had to be moon rock, come from the moon. Trouble is, nobody took the trouble to work out, because it was said to have been presented by Armstrong, Aldrin and Collins, the crew of Apollo 11, to the then Dutch Prime Minister. The trouble is that all the alleged moon rocks were in quarantine at Houston. None of them had been released at the time. The Apollo 11 astronauts were touring on their giant leap tour following their alleged landing. So they couldn't have presented anything to anybody because they didn't have access to anything to present. So because it turned out to be a fake piece of petrified wood, probably from Arizona, it caused a great deal of amusement because, oh look, fake moon rock, because that's all it was. It was presented as moon rock, but it was fake. It was from Earth. Now, there are moon rocks on Earth. The Soviets brought some back, 300 grams, which is about 12 ounces, less than 1 pound of a rock. That was brought back because the Russians were able to land a craft on the moon, scoop up a little bit of regolith, the dust on the lunar surface, fly it back to Earth, same as they'd done those 2 tortoises earlier. The Russians were quite good at space travel. So this idea that these moon rocks were part of the evidence as presented by proponents of NASA's narrative is complete fabrication. Yes, they've got a claim to have 840 pounds of moon rock. That's what they brought back over the 6 missions. And President Nixon, who was then at the time president, presented a piece of moon rock, we're told, to all American states, all 50 American states and 90 foreign countries, most of which have been lost. You can't find them. There is one in the Science Museum here in London, and the official Dutch moon rock in the Netherlands is in a museum in Leiden, another city in the Netherlands. So this moon rock, this fake moon rock is such a ridiculous story because in 2002, I think it was, a gentleman walked into the moon rock storage depot at Houston. It was all stored in a big filing cabinet, put it on a trolley, took it outside, put it on his pickup truck and drove away with it. So that security wasn't very good. But we're told these go to universities around the world who've examined this moon rock and have determined that it's from the moon. Well, of course they've determined it's from the moon because it arrived in a box marked moon rock. The research they were doing was paid for by NASA. So guess what? He who pays the piper calls the tune. They're going to say it's from the moon. Nobody can prove otherwise. And the only people, and there's a great deal of there's a great deal of unexamined moon rock still at NASA. So what's the problem with releasing it?
Yeah, and that's the point that always baffles me too, is that there's an estimated, the exact figure, I think it's over 800 pounds of moon rock was supposedly brought back by the Apollo missions. They never discussed how that was actually done, like how that would affect re-entry of the command module, because you're dealing with, once you enter Earth's forces, now you've got to deal with weight and balance and lift. You do need a certain amount of lift when you enter the atmosphere. The command module itself is designed specifically for that, in order to give it some stability, right? So they never talk about any of that, but they just say, oh, we brought back, and that works out to an average of 140 pounds per mission, but that's not exact. I'm just doing an average here. It was 50 on one mission and like 200 on another mission, but that part is never mentioned. The actual weight and balance, the technology involved in order to make sure that space capsule will stay stabilized when it re-enters. And the other thing is too, that people are under the impression that anybody can check these rocks out, right?
Yep.
And that's not entirely true. NASA screens very carefully the people who request to have a sample of the moon rock for whatever purpose, whether it's a high school teacher, a college professor, it doesn't matter, anyone. And usually those rocks are given to people who are specifically connected in some way, indirectly that is, to NASA or to one of the mainstream science institutions where they may have to rely on funding from the government. So you're not going to get any independent thinking. We know that now. Independent thought when it comes to any institution run by any aspect of the government is very biased. You're not going to get an outside thinking scientist who's going to tell you, who's going to do a real analysis of this, right? And I will add to that one more point, is that these moon rocks, and I think you mentioned this earlier, or you alluded to it for sure, have gone missing.
Yeah, they've gone missing.
Again, this brings back what I said earlier about everything under one roof in a museum, all of it cataloged, given that this was supposed to be the most important accomplishment of mankind in the 20th century, probably of all time, if you want to get to be truthful about it, it's basically what NASA is claiming. And yet these rocks have disappeared. Some of them disappeared. Some of them are fake. People do not get access to these rocks. And then they have, like, I don't know, 700 pounds of rock that are just sitting there. What are they sitting there for? What are they hiding? NASA, Marcus has the proof right here.
Here's my piece of moon rock. Prove it's not. I say it's a piece of moon rock. How do I know it's a piece of moon rock? Because I say so.
Exactly. Yeah. I love it.
It's technically called breccia, which is an accumulation of different parts of the Earth's crust, because that's where it came from.
But isn't that the point, though, that you're actually making? And it's a very good point, a very valid point, is that their proof is because I say so.
Yeah, and I say it's a piece of moon rock.
Exactly.
Look at it. It's rather good. It looks like what we expect moon rock to look like.
Yeah. Okay, Marcus, moving on.
Moving on.
I want to get, I think there's a little bit more on this before we move on to another subject.
Okay.
So this is at the top of page 38.
Yeah, got it.
Even more proof of the moon landing fraud is the fact that, according to NASA itself, all of the blueprints of the hypothetically miraculous technology, advanced hardware that allegedly put a man on the moon on the very first attempt in 1969 were deliberately destroyed after the supposed missions, as well as was all of the technical specifications of the spacecraft, along with all the flight data that recorded the spacecraft's actual location during the missions. You would think that such one-of-a-kind, supremely valuable and expensive designs with all of their irreplaceable data would be kept for just short of all of eternity, both as a record of the achievement and in case such costly to attain information and equipment would be needed again to return to the moon. Let me just read that one last part again. That is, both as a record of the achievement and in case such costly to attain information and equipment would be needed again to return to the moon. Yet the exact opposite is true. This touches a little bit on what we were talking about earlier, where none of this information was gathered up. There was no effort on the US government's part with all their resources to gather all this information, all the documents, the telemetry tapes, and we're talking not just the telemetry tapes for missing tapes for Apollo 11. We're talking about all of the missions. They found a couple of canisters related to Apollo 9, and that only went as far as low Earth orbit. All of the other telemetry tapes, about 140,000 plus reels of telemetry tapes. And we're talking wheels the size of car steering wheels. This was big tape, 15-minute tapes, have 15 minutes worth of information. That's why there's so many of them. Have gone. Enough to fill a couple of houses, medium-sized houses, have disappeared. I actually believe they were destroyed, and I write about that in my first book. Yeah. And this, again, goes to this whole point. Where is this information? Well, why would you destroy it? Why? Because it's too expensive to keep? Can you think of anything else today that we're spending money on that we don't need to?
Exactly. It's such a ridiculous story as well.
Yeah.
But we're expected to believe it. That's the thing. Just because we're told this is the case, oh, you've got to believe it because NASA says so. No, never a straight answer. Yeah,
exactly. Exactly. And again, I mean, it just, if I was part of something valuable, think about it this way. Let's bring it down to a personal level. Let's bring it down to an individual personal level. You have something that you value so much. What are you going to do? You're going to bury it under everything else where you can't find it? No, you're actually going to put it in a safe. And if it's that valuable, you're going to put that safe, or you're going to put that that document or merchandise or whatever it may be that's so valuable to you in a safety deposit box. Yeah. You're going to take really good care of it. And you're going to make sure that wherever you store it is fireproof. You're going to do that.
Yeah.
That's what you're going to do. Now let's bring it up to a national level, NASA and the Apollo moon missions. An estimated back then $30 billion, equivalent to what, $200 billion today, was spent on these missions. Lives were lost. Apollo 1 crew were killed in a tragedy. I have my suspicions about what happened there, but that's a subject for another day. Lives were lost. The inspector who was concerned about quality control himself was killed along with his family in some freak accident. Okay, lives were lost, and then you had the enormous expenditure and the enormous resources that were put into this from an estimated as about 400,000 people that had no idea what the end game was. Everybody was working on their little part, right? The backing of an entire nation, the United States and the world, right? At least initially, not now, but at least initially. And they couldn't find the resources to put all this documents that Bart Sibrel has just mentioned here under one roof, under one museum, the Apollo Moon Missions Museum. They couldn't find the resources to collect all this data. Sorry, folks. That smells to me. Oh, by the way, this for you out there, this is actually water. Okay, wink, wink.
Oh, that's actually water too. Never mind.
Yes.
Yeah, no, it's a good point you make, and it's something that people are finding it very hard to defend now.
Yeah.
Because there's also this famous phrase, but 400,000 people worked on Apollo. They couldn't keep a secret. They didn't need to keep a secret. They didn't know anything about this.
Yes.
Maybe 50 people at the top would know about it. The astronauts would know. The senior management in NASA would probably know about it.
Yeah.
President Johnson knew about
Exactly.
it, as we'll see later on in this particular article.
Yeah, actually, we're going to save that for the next video because that's really good stuff.
Oh, yeah, it is. It is.
Yeah.
So the idea that 400,000 people who worked, and that's true, 400,000 people worked in the 20,000 companies that were creating the hardware for Apollo. They didn't know anything about this. This is such a ridiculous thing. It's like NASA sent a memo around saying, we're going to fake the moon landings, guys, but don't tell anyone. What a stupid idea that 400,000 people could keep a secret. They didn't need. Having said that, large numbers of people can keep secrets for a limited period of time, such as the D-Day landings in June 1944, such as the Manhattan Project, which produced the bomb that wiped out Hiroshima and Nagasaki. People can keep secrets. But this wasn't one that needed to be kept, because NASA were working with people, with contractors. NASA don't produce anything themselves. They just produce the plans to put it into effect. So they will contract with companies like General Dynamics and Lockheed Martin. They will produce the equipment, and they're just told what to produce. No more than that. So the idea that these large numbers of people, the 400,000 people, couldn't keep a secret, they didn't need to keep a secret because they didn't know anything about it. They were patriotic Americans doing their best job that they could. So to accuse them in any way, shape, or form of being privy to a secret that was a national security objective, landing on the moon was a national security objective, and that they would keep this secret that it didn't happen, is an insult to them. So let's stop it at once. Let's stop this idea that 400,000 people kept the secret of Apollo. No, they didn't. They didn't need to. They watched it the same as we did, same as the rest of the world did. The 600 million people, we're told, who watched Apollo launch. Yeah, maybe they did.
There was one interesting point too that you brought up, and that was the comparison to the Manhattan Project and the making of the atomic bomb. There's a big difference though, and I was thinking about this when you were talking, which really supports very much what you're saying, is when they were building the atomic bomb, they practically built a whole city, a whole town, and they housed all those people in one area, and it was out in the middle of nowhere, and it was stringent security. It would be very easy to keep that secret because they weren't letting anybody out. That they were basically locked down in there until they got the job done. where unlike NASA, where you had thousands of people working through various companies, subcontractors, all across the country. And none of them really knew what the end goal was. They knew that they were building a piece. But as you say, and you've said many times, how would that person who's building this particular piece knows that his or her piece got into space, let alone landed on the moon? How would they know? They wouldn't know. They only know by seeing what we all saw, 600 million of us, on the media, which was tightly controlled back then, as it is a little now, but not as much because it's falling apart. But back then it was tightly controlled, and you had Walter Cronkite on CBS News dictating to us what they were doing. That's how we got our information.
Yeah, exactly. And he was a trusted news anchor, Walter Cronkite.
Yes.
Because he was the NBC, I think he worked with.
Yes.
So he was
CBS, I think.
CBS. Okay.
I think it was CBS. Yeah.
Certainly one of the three major networks were the only ones putting information out.
And he was the CIA man.
Oh yeah, he's CIA.
Yeah.
He was quite upfront about it. So he was going to tell the narrative as being dictated by the CIA, the clans in America.
Yeah.
NASA, who give never a straight answer.
Yes.
So you've got all these people who are working against the American people. And don't forget, the American people, through their taxes, were paying for all this, which is why all the photographs are copyright free, because they've already been paid for by the American public.
Exactly.
So thank you, America, for paying for it.
Exactly.
I hope you feel you've got value for money.
You know, it's interesting because I really do think that is now shifting. I think the American people are starting to question a lot now, and they're coming around. And I get a lot more. I just got actually 2 requests for an interview, one in Britain and one in Italy. And it just tells me that people, and it's interesting how they tell me that I was doing research in this and this and this, and I came across your book, and I thought we should add this to the topic, right? And a lot more people are now asking questions.
Yeah.
And they're not satisfied with the answers they're getting, and I think that's the difference now today, in terms of this whole onslaught of misinformation and disinformation that's actually coming from them, not from us.
Yeah.
Right. We're accused of actually giving misinformation and disinformation when it's actually coming from government and become a real technocracy, with the online platforms censoring everything we say. So, Marcus, I thought this would be a good point to wrap up for now, because there's so much more to get into, and I think we can continue on. I've marked off where we left off here, and I think we can continue more on this in our next video. I think we've given the viewers enough to digest for a while. And for the viewers out there, I'm probably going to be I'll probably post this in 2 or 3 parts anyway. So I usually find that's much better. But Marcus, is there anything you want to add before we close?
No, just to say that I appreciate all the work that you've done, all the work that Scott and Robert are doing, that Jarrah White is doing, that David Percy's doing. There are people who are looking into it, and Raza Vihari, you mentioned earlier.
Yes.
Who's provided some very, very interesting information, because he works in a country that doesn't believe America landed man on the moon. He works in China. They teach that in their university, that no human has landed on the moon. So if you've been to a Chinese university, that's what you'd have heard. So the idea that people are now, as you say, becoming much more familiar with the facts behind this. It may seem on first sight to be a strange subject to pursue, as we have for many years. It is not a strange, because it opens up so many other areas, So many, not just the JFK assassination, which you've mentioned and which you're working on, but the whole recent medical emergency that we've all been going through.
Yeah.
And now we're seeing the other side of the story because people are now able to examine it in detail. They can see what's contained within some of these jabs.
Yeah.
You can see that, and they're questioning it. It's a point I made when I was asked, because I'm old enough to be amongst the first people to be offered their jab. I said, yeah, I'd love to have it. I'd love to have it. No problem at all. I just got one question. Have the animal trials been completed, written up, published, and peer reviewed? And they said, oh, no, that would take years. I'll wait, I said. I'm still waiting.
Yeah.
So it's perfectly possible to be part of the ecosystem, if you like. You notice I didn't refuse it. I deliberately didn't refuse it. I just said, yes, I'll have it, but, and that's what now we're seeing the same thing occurring with Artemis program. It's Apollo 2.0. And there are now many hundreds of people, thousands of people who have a lot of good information about Apollo and are saying, okay, they're going to do it again with Artemis. Let's see how they get on. Not just NASA, but Elon Musk with his Starship. There are people who are now saying, okay, we'll watch it. And the fact that he destroyed his launch site, and that is visible. You can see the rocks being chucked into the ocean about half a mile away. And there's a car that was parked far too close to the rocket that was destroyed by a piece of concrete. That was caught on camera. A piece of concrete hit the back of the car, destroyed it.
Yeah.
So, way to go, Elon. It's not that simple. You can't just launch something. It's not that simple. Getting into Earth orbit is relatively easy. Getting to the moon, that's the hard bit. And
I think Neil Peel had a really good analogy with that. I think it was Neil Peel. And he's done some really good work himself. When he likened when the Artemis blew up 3/4 ways into on its launch.
Yeah.
And NASA called it a success because it got that far. And Neil Peel's analogy was that was like saying that the Titanic was a success because it made it 3/4 ways across the Atlantic Ocean.
Yeah.
I mean, and not to belittle the tragedy of Titanic, a lot of innocent souls were lost on that, and I'm not laughing by any means. It's a serious topic, and that's a book in and of itself. But he's right. I mean, that's like just brushing it off, right?
Yeah.
It was not a success. The rocket blew up. It was a failure.
Yeah, it was.
It was a failure. Call it what it is. It was a failure.
Yeah.
And the other point, Marcus, you brought up about what's happening today, and we'll use code words because we have to watch the censors. Is that I'd like to add one more thing to your excellent question to those who's will you take our solution to protect yourself? And you said sure when the show me the animal trials, and no animal trials. Well, I'll wait. I'd like to add to that. Show me the ingredients. You go into any place to get that what, and you ask for the insert, and out comes the insert. And when you open it up, there's one sentence on the top, and it says intentionally left blank. The rest is just white paper. There's no ingredients listed. I don't give, pardon my language, to the viewers, I don't give a fuck about the emergency order that says that they don't have to list ingredients. You want us to take that shit, you list the ingredients, and then we'll decide, right? So the good news is, and I want to end on this note, and I think Marcus, you would agree with me, and I think actually you brought up the point yourself anyway, is that people are waking up. People are asking more questions. People are a lot more aware. The trust right now in overall science is at an all-time low. I mean, it's incredible the distrust now that people have in overall science. They just don't trust it anymore, right? And that's the good news, because people are now starting to become a lot more aware, and they're asking more questions, and they're demanding answers.
Yeah, they are. And quite right too. And there are so many other subjects around. But just to finish, the next session we do, we'll name the people who were present when Apollo was faked.
Actually, you know what we'll do? The next session, we'll start with that and work our way back and get the rest of this stuff in. I would like to talk about that, because that is excellent. I have it right here in front of me, and I'm going to save that for the viewers out there. Yep. This is a cliffhanger. Okay. This is a cliffhanger. Yes, wow. like this is water, right? Wink, right? This is a cliffhanger. Yeah. So we're going to start with that.
And that's moon rock.
And that's a moon rock. That's a moon rock. Anyway, Marcus, I really appreciate this. It's been too long. I hope that we get together again soon, maybe next month. It's been, I'd like to continue this series. It's excellent. A call out to Raza, who's Dr. Raza Vahari himself is putting out an excellent series on smoking gun. It's called the Smoking Gun series. So I'm sure people, please check that out on the Apollo Detectives channel and on Raza's channel as well. So that is, and I want to continue this particular series with Marcus Allen. I really appreciate you coming on today. Thanks for all that wonderful information. Everyone out there, we'll see you again in the next video. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.
Like a wrecking ball going back and forth in a line.